Hi guys, evening. Can you hear me? Can you see me? If yes, type yes in the chat box. Oh, great. Nice. How are you guys doing? Happy Independence Day to everyone. Happy Independence Day, yes. Okay, so actually, yeah, you were supposed to have your Manas. I guess you asked me this question, but in general, also, I was anyways going to say this thing that we were supposed to have hi, Happy Independence Day, Ashay. Happy Independence Day, Harris. Evening, everyone. Yeah, Happy Independence Day, Dhanashree, Sambhavi. Okay, so you were actually supposed to have your political lecture today, but I have some work to do tomorrow evening. So that's the reason why I just requested ma'am to shift the lecture today. Yes, hi Harshit, hi Durin. So happy Independence Day, everyone. So today you'll be having economical lecture, and tomorrow evening you'll be having one political lecture. Fine, it's just Saturday, Sunday. The fine we used to have our lectures, foundation lectures on Sundays. So I just requested ma'am for once, and today you have your economical lecture. Fine. So let's start with the economical lecture. And okay, let me start sharing the screen. Can you guys see the chat box? Can you guys see the chat box? I mean, not chat box. I mean, can you forgive me? Not the chat box, but can you guys see the shared screen? Okay, and great. So let's quickly revise. Hi Kevin, happy Independence Day. So let's quickly revise and yeah, let's start with the economic thing. So quick revision. Kya the inflation we started with, and sorry, inflation we started with, and we discussed about what we discussed: the definitions, types and reasons, impacts, associated terms, measure, how to control inflation. All this we discussed. Just briefly revise those things in your mind. Okay, why I'm saying this, because from today onwards there is a twist. Thoda difference hoga. Okay, that's the reason why. And then we also discussed about the concept of liquidity and the monetary policy. We also discussed about this and contents together. What is monetary policy framework? Monetary policy in India, the tools of monetary policy. So it was CRR, SLR, all these things. Now, ये चीज थोड़ा news में था. Can anyone tell me why it was in news? Why was this in news? The tools, I mean CRR, SLR, monetary policy and monetary policy committee. Why was this in news? Can anyone tell me just? ये क्यों news में था? Has anything happened this week or maybe the last week? Something which has happened, which have created headlines. RBI updated the repo rate and all. Yes. So I guess last time had we gone, had I shown you the RBI ka web page, I shared the Google Chrome and shown you the RBI ka web page, and okay, Nakul is saying yes. Everyone is saying no. Manas says yes. I mean, I have shown this in the general batch, not in the foundation batch. So I guess foundation batch ka baki hai, wo reh gaya, wo kar lenge. Few are saying yes, the others are saying no. I don't recall exactly. So let's do one thing. Maybe in the anyways that is supposed to be done in the Q&A wala part. So we'll do that. We'll also discuss once कि ये time क्या हुआ था. ये time actually situation क्या था about the repo rate, reverse repo rate. What is the situation of monetary policy? All these things we'll discuss for once. Fine. So we'll have a look at that. The next is impacts of monetary policy. वो देखना बाकी है. वो I mean वो हम लोगों ने देख लिया है. ये time जो update हुआ है उसके बाद we'll just have a look कि क्या था इसका impacts. ठीक है. Then there is national income. We discuss this topic. We try to understand this topic. उसमें क्या आएगा? उसमें the meaning of national income. Very vague term. Then we understood the topics like GDP, NDP, GNP, NNP. All these topics, all these terms we understood. Okay, moving on. Then yes, the GDP deflator. ये topic रह गया था inflation वाला जो है यहाँ पे हम लोगों ने discuss कर लिया. Okay, we went ahead, we discussed the topic of poverty. Or ये topic, in this topic of poverty, I basically told you that basically shifting from national income to poverty, जो पहले तीन topics ये थे, inflation, monetary policy और national income वाले ये तीन दो topics थे. ये तीन topics वो वाले topics थे जो core hardcore economics वाले part थे. But अभी का जो ये part है, which was poverty, and उसके बाद वाला part जो employment वाला था, this was something which was humane side of economics. That was human side of economics. ठीक है. So I that's why I asked you to by heart a bit. थोड़ा रटना पड़ेगा, थोड़ा by heart करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है. So this was something which we had seen. Now, just one second. Someone in the waiting room. Yes. So now what has happened after the employment wala part, I very well intend to switch again to the hardcore economics. ठीक है, तो थोड़ा वापस will switch again to the core side of economics, just like inflation, just like national income. वो वाले topics will sort of discuss similar to those topics. ठीक है, because going a lot with these poverty, unemployment वगैरह वो सबसे अगर बहुत ज़्यादा discuss करेंगे तो maybe it's the economic gets a bit boring. So that's the reason why बीच में थोड़ा बहुत ऐसा conceptual आ जाना चाहिए, economy थोड़ा concepts वाला आना चाहिए. That's what we'll be discussing today. So yeah, contents of poverty, poverty contents में what is poverty, types of poverty, poverty cycle. Types of poverty मतलब क्या, situational poverty, generational poverty, and situational poverty and what was the other one? Situational and what were the types of poverty? One was situational, the other was generational. Can anyone remind me that? Can anyone remind me that? Situational, generational, absolute and relative. Yeah, I skipped that. So absolute poverty and relative poverty, very true. So absolute poverty and relative poverty, we know absolute poverty matlab actually being deprived of goods and services. Relative poverty, you do not have equal amount of wealth as your colleagues in your community. Fine, so that's the other type of poverty. Then there is poverty cycle, then associated firms, we discuss all these parts. Strategies by the government, last Q&A, we discussed that as well. Fine, so we understood the topic of poverty. Last time we also discussed the topic of employment. So in that employment, we have the definition of employment, the causes of employment, ठीक है, types of employment. ये मेरे ख्याल से ये सारी चीजें हो गई. Definition is done, causes of employment is done, types of employment, I mean unemployment is also done, and associated terms थोड़ा हो गया, थोड़ा बाकी था. मेरे ख्याल से last time हम लोगों ने the concept of demographic dividend, the demographic transition theory वगैरह वो सब discuss किया था, right? Okay, great. ठीक है. Yes, वो सारी चीजें. Actually, that is something which is you guys anyways need not understand right now. वो आपको बाद में भी आएगा. हाँ, demographic तक हुआ था. वो वाला हम लोग part कर रहे थे. ठीक है. And I told you how India is blessed right now. How the country is blessed right now. Why? Because country has very favorable. Yes, the graphs. Very true. So country has very favorable demographic right now because the working age population is very high as compared to the number of dependents. Okay, the number of dependents are less as compared to the working age people. So that's the situation of demography right now, and that's the reason why we are getting some benefits in the economy also. Okay, so and the last is Q&A. So let's quickly discuss this. Okay, so ये हम लोगों ने definition of employment, I mean unemployment rate ये वगैरह देख लिया था. Quickly just have a look, have a glance so that you remember this. Causes of employment, so very many causes we read about: large population, low and no education. Okay, I guess we discussed a lot about the divide between what is being taught to us and what is demanded in the industry. So uske bare mein, this was the point, I guess. Okay, and we discussed each of these points in detail. You can just make a cursory look on it. Then there was types of unemployment, many types of unemployment. So there was disguised unemployment. ठीक है, disguised unemployment क्या था कि एक जगह पे सिर्फ 3 लोग चाहिए but फिर भी 10 लोग लगा है. So the remaining 7 people are doing nothing. They are actually employed, but are they contributing anything to the economy? No, they are not. So that's disguised unemployment. उसके बाद हम लोगों ने पढ़ा था about structural unemployment. Structural unemployment मतलब क्या? It is a situation जहाँ पे economy में ही कुछ structural change हुआ, like change in demand, change in technology. ठीक है, we discussed in detail about this. We also discussed about frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment क्या होता है? It's basically shifting from one job to another job. That's frictional unemployment. Then there is cyclical. Cyclical unemployment matlab there are few economists who believe that every economy goes through different cycles of what boom and cycles of recession. So cyclical unemployment matlab those type of situations, those type of instances when the economy goes through depression or a recession, or वो time पे unemployment create होने वाला, that is cyclical unemployment. Okay, so we had discussed this. Someone in the waiting room. Yeah. Then there was something called as underemployment. Underemployment matlab kya? You are worth more than what the job you are offered. Okay, you are worth much more than the job you are offered. Okay, so maybe you are an engineer, or maybe you are a PhD, but you still have a naukri of a job, watchman or something like that. Okay, maybe a vegetable vendor. You are still. So that's an example of being underemployment. Okay, India is facing this problem, underemployment wala India is facing the problem of. Okay, then there was something called a seasonal unemployment. Seasonal unemployment matlab kya? It occurs especially in India. Why? Because of the seasonal monsoonal nature of Indian climate. Okay, so we have 4 months of monsoon where there is heavy showers, heavy rainfalls. Okay, so वो time पे जो भी unemployment create होता है, especially in the, I mean, employment create होता है, that goes away when there is dry season. और वो dry season के time पे जो unemployment create होता है, that is called a seasonal unemployment. Cool. The next is vulnerable unemployment. मतलब क्या? Those people who do not have any kind of social security. ठीक है, especially the people who are there, who are in the unorganized sector. ठीक है, they are in the unorganized sector. Okay, this is one of the main types of unemployment in India, especially vulnerable unemployment. Okay, because almost 90% of the workforce of the country lies in the unorganized sector. Many of them belong to agriculture. So this vulnerable unemployment is one of the many very grave types of unemployment in India. Cool. Moving on, the next is associated terms. ये कुछ discuss कर रहे थे हम लोग last time. And yes, so working age population, we try to understand basically population lying between 15 to 64 years of age. Okay, that is working age population, and the working age population is around what, 63.4%. It's around 63.4% in India right now, which is very good, which is very favorable. So we have a large chunk of population who lies in the working. I hope you remember that cohort. Cohort कुछ याद है? Let me just show you cohort. Cohort याद है कि हम लोग last time discuss किया था. Do you remember that? How many of you guys remember cohort? That's great. That's great. So you guys remember this. Let me just show you on a graph. If this is the population graph of the country, the y-axis shows the age and the x-axis shows the number of people, I mean the population of the country. So India's cohort right now is like this. Sorry, just one second. This takes a lot of time to erase and all. So India's cohort right now is something like this. So basically, we have less number of people who are children's. We have many people who are in the working age. We have many people who are in the working age, and less number of people who are old. So that's the cohort of India right now, and that's the reason why we have many working age population as compared to the dependents, and that is something which is a very favorable situation. Okay, so ये last time देखा था हम लोगों ने. Okay, the next is dependency ratio. Dependency ratio we already know. Dependency ratio मतलब number of people who are below 15 and who are above 64. Below 15 and above 64. There was some mistake on the slide. I guess I asked you to correct it. Okay, but ये याद रखना, people below 15 to above 64. That's the number of people who are called as dependents. Okay, in a population. The next is demographic dividend. We went a lot into the details of the idea of demographic dividend. ठीक है, and we know this thing. Dividend मतलब क्या? It's an economical term. जिसमें dividend मतलब the monetary returns which you get. So dividend मतलब money, demography मतलब population, demographic dividend मतलब population के होने population की वजह से any kind of boost you get in your economy, that's demographic dividend. So let's just read demographic dividend very quickly. ये खाली ये term एक बार पढ़ लेते हैं. So demographic dividend, demographically linked economic boost caused by the rise in the working age population. Caused by the rise in the working age population. Let me erase this question. Yes. So it is demographically linked economic boost caused by the rise in the working age population and consequent drop in the dependent population. India is currently reaping the benefits of demographic dividend. So we are actually facing the benefits of demographic dividend. So ideally कुछ ना करने में भी अपना GDP कितना 6, 7, 8% होना चाहिए था. But something bad happened in the economy, and that's the reason why our economy right now is projected to be negative. It's projected to be negative. So there is no GDP growth this year. There is going to be GDP contraction. There is going to be GDP contraction. Again, people are hoping so कि ये GDP contraction, let's hope it to be in single digits rather than being in double digits. Many people are saying it can be in double digits. Double digits मतलब -10, -15% हम लोग का GDP जा सकता है. GDP growth जा सकता है. Minus हो गया इसका मतलब क्या? There is GDP contraction. It's not growth. Okay, and people are praying that hopefully by the end of the year we may land up in single digits. We may land up in single digits. So that's the situation of the economy right now. Just one second, someone there in the waiting room. Yes, fine. So we have understood this until now, and I guess इतना हुआ था. क्या इसके आगे का part जो, like for example, have we dealt with this employment elasticity and all? We have not, right? इतना हम लोगों ने कर लिया था. ठीक है. Any doubts to anyone until this? Any doubts to employment? First of all, have we done employment elasticity? Give me an answer to this. हम लोगों ने employment elasticity नहीं किया ना, right? Last time, have we done it? ठीक है, वो रह गया. We'll deal with that. We'll discuss that. And any doubts to anyone until now? If no, type clear. If no, just type clear in the chat box. Cool, cool. That's great. That's great. That's great. So let's proceed. Let's proceed. Let's discuss the term employment elasticity, another associated term with respect to employment. Yes. So what is employment elasticity? Employment elasticity hota kya hai? This is the term which you tend to read in the newspapers. ये newspapers में भी दिखता है और economic survey ये term extensively use करता है. बहुत time economic survey makes use of this term. ठीक है. So let's understand this. Let's read this. Very simple topic, not that difficult to understand. Employment elasticity. What is employment? Employment elasticity is the measure of how employment varies with economic output. Employment varies with economic output. Employment elasticity of 1 implies that with every 1 percentage point growth in GDP, मतलब GDP अगर 1% से increase हुआ, ठीक है, employment increases by 1%. So अगर employment elasticity 1 है, मतलब GDP अगर 1% से increase हुआ, तो employment भी 1% से increase हुआ, ठीक है. In another words, if I say this thing that अगर suppose employment elasticity 2 है, इसका मतलब क्या, GDP 1% से grow हुआ, तो employment 2% से grow हुआ. So that's high employment elasticity. That's high employment elasticity. And for a country, having high employment elasticity is good. Why? Because एक GDP मतलब 1% GDP अगर grow हो रहा है, फिर भी twice 2% employment increase हो रहा है. So that's something which is good for an economy. High employment elasticity is good for an economy. Let's read further. Okay. It is an irony that few years back, when India was on a high growth trajectory, जब भी इंडिया लाइक 2000s की बात करें हम लोग, ठीक है, its growth was jobless growth. It had jobless growth. India had jobless growth. क्या था इसका मतलब? इसका मतलब ये है that jobless growth means that high growth in GDP did not accompany a similar growth in employment. GDP में तो growth हो रहा था, it did not accompany a similar growth in employment, resulting in low employment elasticity. ठीक है. For example, from 2004 to 2009-10, जो last decade में 2004 to 2009-10, employment elasticity of India was as low as 0.01%. मतलब क्या, अगर 1% से GDP grow हो रहा है, employment 0.01% से ही grow हो रहा है. बहुत hardly, like GDP is growing, but there is no new jobs being created, no new employment is being created. This type of situation was called as what? It was called as jobless growth. It is called as jobless growth. And what I want you guys to do is check out previous year's paper. There has been a question. There is a question in the mains. They asked about jobless growth. Okay, it's I guess 2018 or 2019 paper, very recent 2018 or 2019 का paper आया था. ठीक है, उसमें ये लोग ने question they have asked this question already, called as jobless growth. Just remember this. Okay, what next? Yes, let's read the next paragraph. Just okay, in the recent years, the highest employment elasticity has been shown by sectors like construction and utility sectors, including utility मतलब क्या, उसमें energy आएगा, water, waste management. These are the utility sectors. ठीक है. So construction या फिर utility sectors में high employment elasticity देखा गया. मतलब क्या, अगर उसमें 1% point से अगर GDP grow हो रहा है, GDP अगर 1% से construction sector में GDP अगर 1% से बढ़ रहा है, तो employment 2% से बढ़ रहा है. That's good. मतलब high employment elasticity. ठीक है. These are the biggest job generators in our country. Further, the graphics show that the farm sector in India has shown negative employment elasticity. So farming sector, agriculture sector shows negative employment elasticity. मतलब agriculture चलो GDP में उसका growth rate बढ़ भी जा रहा है, but फिर भी उसमें नए job create नहीं हो रहे. ठीक है. No new job is being created in the farming sector, in the agriculture sector. So agriculture sector has become those sectors which has become less employment elastic. Okay, it has become less employment elastic. This simply indicates that growth in the farm sector is accompanied by reduction in the farm employment as more and more people leave this sector and go out for jobs in non-farm sectors. Okay, इसका मतलब क्या, अगर GDP of agriculture is increasing, GDP of farm sector is increasing, still it doesn't mean new employment, new job is being created. No new job is created. People are forced to quit farming. People are quitting farming and going to some other sector. Have you understood the idea of employment elasticity? समझा आपको employment elasticity? Any doubts to anyone about employment elasticity? If no, type clear in the chat box. Type clear in the chat box if you. That's great. That's great. That's nice. So you have understood jobless growth. Sure, Saloni. Jobless growth मतलब क्या? कि growth हो रहा है, but job create नहीं हो रही. That's jobless growth. And India had experienced this. कभी in the last decade. ठीक है. जब India had experienced that. In fact, I took the example of what 2004, 5 and 2009, 10. We took the example of these years. ये situation में क्या हो रहा था? जो the employment elasticity was 0.01%. मतलब क्या कि अगर GDP 1% से बढ़ रहा है, तो कम से कम ऐसा होना चाहिए था कि employment should also, the total number of employment in the country should also have increased by 1%. But this was not happening. The total number of employment in the country was increasing only by 0.01%, which was a very small fraction. 0.01% is almost like as good as zero. So the situation was कि GDP तो बढ़ रहा है, growth is happening, there is growth happening, but jobs not being created. That's called jobless growth. That was the situation of jobless growth. Fine. So that's the phenomena India had experienced in the last decade, and this is what this term is. Have you understood this? Oh, great. That's nice. So let's move on. Let's go to the next topic. See, this is something which is important. I mean, अगर आपको question आएगा exam में, in the mains, what you can write is you have to write in these terms. Yes, very true, Harshit. 0.01 is not small for a big population, but at the same time, at least look at the number of people entering into the workforce every year. Okay, if suppose the number of people entering into the workforce is almost 5% of the entire population, then in that comparison, 0.01% is very less, because people entering into workforce in comparison to the jobs offered to those people is very less. If suppose people entering into the workforce 5%, but jobs offered to them is just 0.01%. It's very less, right? I'm saying in comparative terms, try to understand in comparative terms. Cool. Okay. So this was the idea of jobless growth. This was something. That's great. That's great. So let's move on. Let's go to the next concept. Yeah, I was saying you have to make use of these terms in your examination. Fine, because when you're writing economics ka answer in the examination, you need to make them understand. You need to make them feel that you have the idea of economics, you have the knack of economics, and make use of these technical terms. Make use of these technical terms so that he realizes this, that you have come studying. Okay. Let's go to the next topic. The next topic is, yes, there is something called as misery index. Misery index. Just another term. Misery index क्या बोलता है? Index of economic misery. Index of economic misery. That is sum of rates of inflation and unemployment for an economy. Higher the value, greater is the misery. मतलब it is nothing but sum of rate of inflation and the rate of unemployment. ठीक है, rate of inflation and the rate of unemployment. जितना ज्यादा inflation रहेगा, मतलब it's a bad sign for the economy, right? और जितना ज्यादा unemployment है, that is also a bad sign of economy. So if the sum of the rate of inflation and the rate of unemployment in an economy is high, ठीक है, is high, इसका मतलब क्या? There is more misery in the economy. The people are actually suffering. क्योंकि वो लोग high inflation तो face कर रहे हैं. There is price rise, but at the same time there is no job created. There is high unemployment rather. ठीक है, so just remember this term. Not that अभी ये exam में पूछा नहीं गया आज तक, but then it's something which you can write in the exam. I mean, you can write in the mains का exam. ये prelims में नहीं पूछा गया. You can write this in the mains. That's what I've seen. Cool. Let's go to the next term. The next term is again something called as Okun's law. Okay, again a very rare term. These two terms are not that you won't be able to find these terms in many books. Okay, so let's just understand these two terms. ये क्या है? Okun's law क्या है? Okay, based on empirical research by Arthur Okun. Let me adjust the screen. Yes. The law describes the relationship between unemployment and growth rate in an economy. Unemployment and growth rate in an economy. So basically, Okun's law क्या करता है? It tries to describe the relationship between growth rate and unemployment. As per it, if GDP grows at 3% per annum and the unemployment rate would not change, in the case of faster growth rates, every extra above the 3% will have a decrease in unemployment rate by its half. That is 4% growth rate will decrease unemployment rate by 0.5%, half of 1%, which is the extra above 3%. Similarly, a growth rate below 3% will have the same but opposite impact on employment, that is it increases. Though the law was perfectly okay. Now this is something which we have already discussed once. ये हम लोगों ने पहले discuss किया है. I guess आपसे discuss किया है या general batch I don't remember. But do you remember the quid pro quo relationship between growth? I mean inflation or unemployment. You remember the relationship in the Phillips curve, right? Okay, inflation and unemployment. You remember the relationship in Phillips curve. Let's try to understand Okun's law. इसमें क्या था? इसमें भी ऐसा ही था. There is a relationship between GDP and there is a relationship between. Just one second. Just one second. Yeah, sorry for the hindrance. Sorry for the hindrance. Yes, let me tell you this. We had discussed about the relationship between inflation and unemployment. We have discussed about that. Okay, so inflation or unemployment, there is an inverse relationship. We are already aware about that. Okay, or try to understand this. Okun's law मतलब क्या बोलता है? Okun's law भी ऐसा ही बोलता है that there is a relationship between growth and unemployment. There is a relationship between growth and unemployment. क्या relationship है? Usually, now read this part. ठीक है, अगर जीडीपी ओकन्स लॉ ऐसा बोलता है अगर जीडीपी इज एट 3% per annum, the unemployment rate will not change. ठीक है, if it increases in case of faster growth rate. Now read after this. In case of faster growth rates, every extra above the 3% will have a decrease in the unemployment rate by its half. That is 4% growth rate will decrease unemployment by 0.5%, half of 1%, which is the extra above 3%. ठीक है, so इसका मतलब क्या? इसका मतलब ये that पहले, and this is something which is not today's law, it's something which is पहले का law, and that too only US economy. ठीक है, so just try to understand there is a relationship. Okun's law tries to derive a relationship between growth and unemployment. अगर growth बढ़ रहा है तो employment भी बढ़ना चाहिए. अगर growth increase हो रहा है तो employment भी increase होना चाहिए. But अगर growth increase हो रहा है, employment increase हो रहा है, इसका मतलब क्या? Unemployment is decreasing, right? Unemployment is decreasing. So if the growth is increasing, unemployment is decreasing. That's what Okun's law is. That's what Okun's law is. ये exact, don't go into the figures कि 3% से extra 1% से बढ़ा तो उसका half से कम होगा unemployment. Don't go into the figures. Just remember, Okun's law suggests this. It's not something which is valid right now. ठीक है, but then Okun's law पहले जब भी था, ठीक है, it used to suggest this. that अगर growth बढ़ रहा है, unemployment कम होना चाहिए क्योंकि new jobs are being created. ठीक है, that's what Okun's law used to say. Read this. ये क्या बोल रहा था? Faster. Just one second, let me start the laser pointer. Yes. In the case of faster growth rates, every extra above 3% will have a decrease in the unemployment rate by its half. Don't go into the figures, but just understand faster growth rate will decrease the unemployment. Faster growth rate will decrease the unemployment. And the reverse is also true. Similarly, a growth rate below 3% will have the same but opposite impact on unemployment. It will have the same. Agar suppose growth rate is going below 3%, then the unemployment will increase. Fine. So we have earlier in inflation, we have discussed about relationship of inflation with respect to unemployment. We know जितना inflation बढ़ेगा, उतना unemployment कम होता है. We know that. ठीक है. And in this situation, as per the Okun's law, we also now know this thing कि जितना growth बढ़ेगा, उतना unemployment कम. जितना growth बढ़ेगा, उतना unemployment कम होगा. और अगर growth कम हो रहा है, तो unemployment बढ़ेगा. ठीक है. So that's the reason why in the previous slide we discussed about jobless growth. Ideally क्या होना चाहिए था? Ideally ऐसा होना चाहिए था कि अगर growth बढ़ रहा है, ठीक है, तो unemployment कम होना चाहिए था और employment ज्यादा create होना चाहिए था. ठीक है, in the previous slide we have already discussed that. But then we rather saw jobless growth. Jobless growth मतलब क्या? Growth बढ़ रहा था but employment बढ़ नहीं रहा था, कम हो रहा था. ठीक है, that's something which is that's something which defies Okun's law. Fine. Have you understood this? Okay, let's read the last two lines. Though the law was perfectly correct for the period of US economy Oken studied, it may not be valid today in either US or anywhere else. But in general, the law is still used by experts and policymakers as a thumb rule to estimate the relationship between growth and job creation. Fine, have you understood this? Oken's law say if you are not, if you didn't digest this entire thing, just try to remember growth बढ़ेगा. Oken's law ऐसा बोलता है that growth बढ़ेगा तो unemployment कम होगा क्योंकि जॉब ज्यादा क्रिएट हो रहा है, और अगर ग्रोथ कम हो रहा है तो एम्प्लॉयमेंट जॉब ज्यादा क्रिएट हो रहा है और एम्प्लॉयमेंट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट कम होगा. Have you understood this? If yes, type clear. Just type clear in the chat box if you have understood this. If you want me to repeat, I mean, I can. Oh, that's great. That's great. That's nice. That's nice. Okay, let's move on. Let's go to the next slide. Let's try to understand another associated term. Yes, so let's discuss this. The term is called as unemployment trap. The term is called as unemployment trap. Let's try to read this term. A situation where an unemployed getting unemployment allowance is not encouraged to seek work employment because his her after tax earnings as employed is less than the benefits as unemployed. मतलब ये क्या कहना चाहता है, ये अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट ट्रैप मतलब ऐसा है कि not in India, we don't find this in India except for Manrega and all. ठीक है, but in US and the Western economies we see this thing that whenever an individual becomes unemployed, ठीक है, people tend to see unemployed. I mean the government tend to give unemployment allowance. ठीक है, अगर एक बंदा अनएम्प्लॉयड है तो उसको अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट अलाउंस मिलता है. सो अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट ट्रैप क्या है? अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट ट्रैप एक गवर्नमेंट के लिए ऐसा ट्रैप है जिसमें गवर्नमेंट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट अलाउंस पब्लिक को दे रहा है, बट पब्लिक को ऐसा लग रहा है कि मुझे फ्री में इतने पैसे मिल रहे हैं जो शायद से मुझे जॉब करूंगा तो भी उतने नहीं मिलेंगे. ठीक है, मैं जॉब करूंगा तो भी उतने नहीं मिलेंगे. सो दैट्स अ सिचुएशन इन व्हिच पीपल टेंड टू थिंक दिस थिंग कि चलो अनएम्प्लॉयड ही रहता है क्योंकि एनीवेज मैं जॉब करूंगा तो उतने पैसे तो मिलने वाले हैं नहीं जितना अभी अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट अलाउंस में मिल रहा है. ठीक है, सो दैट्स द आइडिया ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट ट्रैप. It's the trap in which the government should avoid to fall. It's not a case of India. Why? Because India doesn't have any concept of unemployment allowance. India में तो कुछ unemployed है तो unemployed है. He has to fend for himself. The government doesn't give any kind of unemployment allowance. Cool. Have you understood this? Okay, let's do one thing. Let's go to the next one. After that, I ask for the consensus. Let's go to the next one. Yes, the next is residual. Yes, residual unemployment. So residual unemployment of those who remained unemployed even in the times of full employment. As for example, employing a severely handicapped person may far outweigh the productivity obtained from him. ठीक है, so basically residual unemployment मतलब क्या कि अगर आपकी इकोनॉमी में फुल एम्प्लॉयमेंट है तो भी few people, fraction of the population, very less number of people in the economy may still remain unemployed. ठीक है, may still remain unemployed. For example, इसमें हम लोगों ने example गिना है, a severely handicapped person, a severely handicapped guy. He is the person who is maybe, I mean, people when trying to recruit him, people will think that जितना ये प्रोडक्टिव आउटकम मुझे मेरे बिजनेस में दे पाएगा उससे ज्यादा तो मेरे एक्सपेंसेस इसको सैलरी वगैरह देने में या फिर उसको सोशल सिक्योरिटी देने में जाएंगे. ठीक है, people may still think of like this. Fine. So which one, Kevin? Which one? Prior one, the unemployment trap, which one? Residual. Yes, I'll tell you. It's nothing. I'm still explaining. Don't worry. Okay. So residual unemployment matlab, there can be a situation in which government succeeds amazingly. Government tries to reduce unemployment to its lowest. ठीक है, गवर्नमेंट सबसे लीस्ट अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट करने का ट्राई करेगी, गवर्नमेंट सबको एम्प्लॉय करने का ट्राई करेगी. ठीक है, बट जब भी गवर्नमेंट ऐसा कर रहा है या फिर जब भी इकोनॉमी में ऐसा सिचुएशन है कि ऑलमोस्ट एवरीवन इज गेटिंग एम्प्लॉयड, स्टिल a small section of the population may still remain unemployed. ठीक है, now one of the reasons why they may remain unemployed is, for example, if they are severely handicapped person, ठीक है, so if a person is severely handicapped, he may find difficult to find a job. Why? Because in that situation, when he's severely handicapped, the employer, I mean, if I am the businessman or someone is a businessman, the employer will think like this कि उसको मैं recruit करके कोई job दूं तो वो मेरे business में जितना productive काम आएगा उससे ज्यादा तो मेरा उसके ऊपर खर्चा है. ठीक है, उससे ज्यादा तो मेरा उसके ऊपर खर्चा है। तो गवर्नमेंट कितना भी कोशिश करे, थोड़ा बहुत अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट रह ही जाता है, रेसिडुअल एम्प्लॉयमेंट रह ही जाता है। ठीक है, आर यू गेटिंग इट? सो दैट्स द आइडिया ऑफ, एक्चुअली इट्स रेसिडुअल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, शुड हैव बीन रेदर रेसिडुअल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, नॉट रेसिडुअल एम्प्लॉयमेंट। ठीक है, सो रेसिडुअल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट मतलब क्या, अभी भी देयर आर फ्यू पीपल हु आर अनएम्प्लॉयड इवन इफ गवर्नमेंट मेक्स इट्स बेस्ट एफर्ट्स और द इकोनॉमी मेक्स its best to ensure this thing that there are no people who are unemployed, but still a small section of the people may still remain unemployed because they find it very difficult to find jobs. I'll give you one more example. For example, a pregnant woman just before her labor. Okay, at that point of time, if the economy has 100% employment, if the economy has 100%, almost around 100% employment, okay, just मतलब 100% नहीं, almost around 100%, फिर भी a women who is just about to experience labor now, the employer will think of this thing that should I employ this woman? Should I employ this woman? Why? Because when I employ I mean a pregnant woman who is expecting delivery very soon, okay, maybe the moment I employ her, okay, उसके थोड़े टाइम में तो she'll ask for maternity leave and she'll leave. Okay, maybe after that she may come, she may not come, she may take the benefits of social security. So at that point of time, few businessmen or few employers will think like this, that क्या उस handicap को recruit करना चाहिए, क्या वो pregnant women को just before the delivery or just before labor should we recruit those people, those kind of people, those kind of sections who still remain unemployed even after almost everyone is employed in the economy. That is called as residual unemployment. Have you understood this, Kevin, now? Great, great. So fine. So I'm assuming all of you guys have understood this topic. No, unemployment trap is not beneficial for the government, Dhruva. Unemployment trap is not beneficial for the government. Why? Because ultimately, what will government be doing? Government सिर्फ subsidy दे रहा है सबको कि unemployment trap है, unemployment allowance है, unemployment allowance है. Government ऐसे देते रहेगा और वो लोग क्या? They will never even strive. They will never even strive to go and take any new job. Why? Because the amount of unemployment allowance they are getting is much more than the amount of unemployment is much more than the amount of money they could have earned by a job. Okay, so unemployment trap is not good. So I hope I have answered your question, Dhruva. If yes, just type yes. Okay, great. Fine. So let's go to the next part. The next part is steps by the government to deal with unemployment. So हम लोगों ने ऐसा मेरे ख्याल से poverty में भी किया था. ठीक है, let's try to understand the steps taken by the government to deal with unemployment. So what are the steps? Okay, so these are few schemes which you can remember the government had taken to deal with unemployment. Okay, schemes like what? Integrated Rural Development Program, IRDP 1980. Few things which you will have to by heart. ठीक है, क्योंकि बहुत पुरानी schemes है. It doesn't make sense for you guys to go into details of these schemes. पुराने schemes में जाने के लिए it doesn't make sense for you guys. If at all any scheme from now onwards to the time you are giving the exam, उसके बीच में कोई भी scheme वगैरह आ रहा है, at that scheme becomes important because you will have to by heart that, you will have to learn that scheme and you will have to understand the details of that scheme. ये सब पुराने schemes हैं. So just try and remember them. If in case मेंस में अगर क्वेश्चन आए, so you are just supposed to write them. You are not supposed to elaborate. ठीक है, तो क्या है स्कीम, क्या था? प्रधानमंत्री कौशल विकास योजना, PMKVY 2015, मनरेगा 2005. मनरेगा I guess everyone knows. Last time also many people answered. ठीक है, तो स्टार्टअप इंडिया स्कीम 2016. स्टार्टअप इंडिया स्कीम, how many of you guys are aware of startup India scheme and stand up India scheme? What is startup India scheme for? Just tell me, what is startup India scheme for? किसके लिए ये startup India scheme किसके लिए? Come on guys, what is startup India scheme for? Have you heard of the scheme earlier? Have you heard of the scheme earlier? Startup India scheme? No? You are saying yes, others are saying no. Okay, many are saying no. Entrepreneur, small start, yes. No. Encourage startup by providing, it's very true. Business, yes, it is for business. Let me tell you what Startup India scheme is. Basically, government in 2015, 2016 realized, yes, and it is for entrepreneurs, it's for startups. Startups, you know, startups matlab kya? It's basically a very small venture on mostly an innovative idea and out of the box problem which the startup tries to solve with usage of technology and all. So it's basically a very small business which they intend to expand, and one day they also expect this, that the startups are given a lot of boost and lot of lot of funding and lot of support. Okay, startups require. Can anyone give me an example of startups in the India right now? Any few startups which have become successful? Few examples of startups. Oyo, Flipkart, Byju's, do that. Correct. Ola, do that. So these are the startups, India-based startups, which have become successful. Okay, which have become successful. Oyo, yes, very true. Uber is an example. Ola is an example. So these are the examples of startups which have become successful in India. And Startup India scheme, government also realized that yes, startups also require some amount of government support. Urban Clapping is an example, very true. Urban Clapping is an example. So Startup India, Zomato, okay, fine. I got it. Abhi, Uber is no Indian, I guess. Yes, Uber is not Indian. Forgive me. Yes, Uber is not. Ola is Indian. Uber is not Indian. Zomato is Indian. Actually, agar dekha jaye, all of these startups have foreign fundings. So none of them are authentically Indian. Many are funded by foreign companies and majority shares. In fact, what the Paytm was Indian, but then now it is more Chinese than Indian. Okay. So there are many policybazaar.com. You keep on hearing about that. That is also Chinese. Largest investment in Paytm and Policybazaar is from China. Okay. So if people are trying to boycott China, they should also boycott these channels and all. But they see them, Dhruv, there are many startups which are successful in India. Unfortunately, they are not able to get funding from Indians. Okay, they are getting enough funding from the other countries. And China is one of the leading countries who tend to give a lot of support to these startups. Unfortunately, Harshit, I do not. See, this is the criticism. This is one of the criticism of the government right now, Startup India scheme. Okay, let's do one thing, Harshit. I'll tell you exactly. थोड़ा detail में जाते हैं इसमें. ठीक है, although it's not something which is required, but then very recently I read an article. जब भी वो चाइना के ऊपर चाइना के आर्टिकल्स का बैन वगैरह उसके बारे में बात चल रहा था. At that point of time, when I read about this, that why should we only ban Chinese goods? ठीक है, why shouldn't we ban Chinese services and Chinese companies as well? ठीक है, even we should do even that. We should even hurt them financially even in this sphere. ठीक है, तभी ऐसा discussion आया था. और and at that point of time, I read about one article. I realized this thing that China, after 2015 and 2014 and 2015, when India was considering the China के साथ अपना relationship बहुत अच्छा हो रहा है. ठीक है, India was considering this कि China के साथ अपना relationship बहुत अच्छा हो रहा है. China बहुत heavily India में fund कर रहा है, investment वगैरह कर रहा है. In fact, आगे हम लोग देखेंगे there is a topic called as BOP. उसमें capital account आएगा, वो आगे हम लोग समझेंगे. So चाइना की वजह से इंडिया में बहुत सारा कैपिटल आ रहा था क्योंकि चाइना बहुत ज्यादा अपने कंट्री का पैसा इंडिया के बिजनेस में लगा रहा था. सो हम लोग को ऐसा लग रहा था चाइना तो अपना बहुत अच्छा दोस्त निकला. चाइना तो अपना बहुत अच्छा दोस्त है और चाइना इज हेल्पिंग अ लॉट. ठीक है, ऐसा हम लोग को 2014 के बाद ऐसा लग रहा था कि चाइना इज वेरी गुड फ्रेंड ऑफ आवर. एंड वी यूज्ड टू सी अ लॉट ऑफ बॉन्ड ह्यूमिंग बिटवीन मोदी जी एंड सी जिनपिंग, राइट. हम लोग ने देखा था वो अहमदाबाद में वो लोग झूला, डू यू रिमेंबर दिस? ये सारे इंसिडेंट्स अहमदाबाद में वो लोग झूला झूलते थे साबरमती आश्रम के बाजू में. ठीक है, एक बार दिल्ली में मिले हैं. ठीक है, बाद में दे मेट वंस इन ममलापुरम, Gandhi Mandir also, very true. They also went to Gandhipur. You must remember this. Mamlapuram, they visited. मोदी जी वो बीच पे चल रहे थे, याद है किसी को? ममलापुरम अभी जस्ट लास्ट ईयर, दिस ईयर और लास्ट ईयर के बीच में. ठीक है, दैट वाज द टाइम जब भी. सो वी वर फीलिंग कि चाइना अपने साथ बहुत अच्छा है. इवन शी जिनपिंग और मोदी जी का ऐसा अच्छा ट्यूनिंग वगैरह लग रहा था हम लोग को. बट नाउ लेटर वी रियलाइज दैट व्हाट वाज चाइना डूइंग. चाइना, yes, last year, I guess last year it happened. But then what now later we realize कि चाइना अभी तक क्या कर रहा था. चाइना की स्ट्रेटेजी ऐसा था कि चाइना अभी तक इंडिया के मार्केट को ऑलरेडी गुड्स से फ्लड कर चुका है. ठीक है, इंडियन मार्केट्स as far as the goods segment is already is concerned, it's already flooded by Chinese commodities. In case of services and in case of investment, also now the China is basically overshadowing Indian investments. Are you getting it? So there is not a single startup in which there is no Chinese investment. There is many startups in which Chinese majority investment is Chinese. For example, to a certain extent you can accept Chinese investment, but then when the Chinese investment become dominant, for example, Paytm, for example, Policybazaar, these are the investments in which Chinese investment is dominant. Dominant matlab they have controlling stakes, they have decision making powers. When you buy shares of a particular company, when you invest beyond a certain extent in a particular company, you have even the power to vote and you have power to influence the decisions. Okay, when this happens, there is a concern, there is a threat to our data, there is a threat to our financial data or every other data. Are you getting it? So that's something which is a cause of concern. And at that point of time, that editorial was highly critical. That particular editorial was highly critical about Startup India scheme and Stand Up India scheme. वो editorial बोल रहा था कि ये सब scheme गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया लॉन्च तो कर देता है बट कुछ करता नहीं है. स्टार्टअप इंडिया स्कीम से ज्यादा तो काम चाइना ने किया है इंडिया के स्टार्टअप्स में इन्वेस्ट करके. ठीक है, अगर स्टार्टअप इंडिया स्कीम सक्सेसफुल होता था, ठीक है, अगर दिस वुड हैव बीन वेरी सक्सेसफुल, सो मे बी एटलीस्ट आज जो हम लोग जो मिलियन प्लस स्टार्टअप, मतलब जो बिग बड़े बड़े स्टार्टअप जो हम लोग इंडिया के सुन रहे हैं, उसमें से कम उसको यूनिकॉर्न स्टार्टअप्स कहते हैं. ठीक है, यूनिकॉर्न स्टार्टअप जो हम लोग सुन रहे हैं, उसमें से कम कुछ स्टार्टअप में तो स्टार्टअप इंडिया प्रोग्राम का नाम आना चाहिए था, बट हार्डली किसी में स्टार्टअप इंडिया प्रोग्राम का नाम आया. और मेजॉरिटी चाइनीज इन्वेस्टमेंट की वजह से दे हैव बिकम सो सक्सेसफुल. Corruption. I don't know about this. I can't say about this. Corruption will be a grave allegation, but I cannot rule out the possibility also, Manas. Fine. Yeah, one thing. You are not supposed to speculate in the examination. You are not supposed to speculate in. So whatever I said are facts. Okay. But then saying this thing, ये सब इसके लिए हो रहा है कि corruption की वजह से, that is something which where you go beyond the red line in the exam. So in the exam, you can write these facts, but you cannot write corruption in the examination. Are we clear? So that's Startup India scheme. Startup India scheme intended to क्या? To give support to the startups. Basically initial investment वगैरह देना startups को tax rebates देना कि 2-4 साल तक तू खुद tax, corporate tax मत pay कर startup. वो वैसे कम नहीं है, right? ठीक है, ऐसे ही startups, many startups were given environment clearance for 3 years ऐसे ही कि तुमको environment clearance वगैरह मांगने की जरूरत नहीं, तुम लोग को ऐसे ही दे देंगे. बाद में many startups were also given what was this? Yes, incubation facility. Incubation facility मतलब क्या कि industries के बड़े-बड़े लोग startup जो भी स्टार्टअप्स रहेंगे उनको कॉन्टैक्ट्स वगैरह देंगे, लीड्स देंगे कि तुम यहाँ पे पूछ सकते हो, वहां पे पूछ सकते हो, कॉन्टैक्ट्स डेवलप करेंगे. ठीक है, सो ऑल दोस थिंग्स वर इंक्लूडेड इन द स्टार्टअप इंडिया स्कीम. एंड सिमिलरली देयर वाज समथिंग कॉल्ड स्टैंड अप इंडिया स्कीम. स्टैंड अप इंडिया स्कीम वाज नथिंग बट स्टार्टअप इंडिया स्कीम फॉर SC, ST, OBC, फॉर वुमेन्स. दैट इज नथिंग बट फॉर ट्राइबल्स. ठीक है, सो दैट इज नथिंग बट स्टैंड अप इंडिया स्कीम. So stand up India scheme is just similar to startup India scheme, but stand up India scheme is for SC, ST, OBC and women's and all. Are we clear? Yes, Kiran, you can write that. This Kiran, what you said, that is what you can write in the examination. Okay, वो आप लिख सकते हो that they were not able to implement the schemes properly. Okay, you can say this thing that they failed in the implementation. They had a good idea, but then they failed in the implementation. That is what you can write in the examination. Kiran, very true. Okay, fine. So that was Startup India scheme. Stand Up India scheme. Again, this could have created employment, but unfortunately, we failed. China succeeded in this. Okay, next is Skill India mission. If you skill a person enough and give it a skill which is required by the industry, then also you can get a person employed. The next is PM Mudra Yojana. Have we discussed Mudra already? Have we discussed Mudra last time? Last time I remember discussing Mudra, but then have we discussed Mudra already? Have you heard of Mudra scheme earlier? Okay, we haven't discussed. I guess in the other batch I may have discussed. But then let me tell you what Mudra scheme is. Yes, let me tell you what Mudra is. So Mudra scheme is basically meant for SHGs. SHG stands for self-help group. अब self-help group क्या होता है? Basically, until now, just imagine a guy who is poor. Imagine a guy who is poor और वो गरीब बंदा वो बैंक में जा रहा है. अब बैंक क्या करेगा? बैंक सोचेगा ना उसको कोई भी लोन वगैरह देने के लिए, बैंक सोचेगा कि क्या इसके पास कुछ कोलैटरल रखने के लिए है, कैन ही गिव मी एनी काइंड ऑफ रिटर्न्स बैक, कैन ही गिव मी एनी मनी बैक. ठीक है, अगर सपोज ये डिफॉल्ट हो गया तो क्या कौन पे करेगा? उसके साइड से कौन पे करेगा? इसका डिफॉल्ट होने का चांसेस क्या है? इसका रिस्क, ये जो मैं इसको लोन दूंगा तो उसमें डिफॉल्ट होने का इसका रिस्क कितना है? ठीक है, ऑल दैट बैंक विल कंसिडर. एंड यूजुअली फॉर अ पुअर गाय टू मीट ऑल द डिमांड्स ऑफ द बैंक एंड टू बी क्रेडिट केपेबल, दैट वाज वेरी डिफिकल्ट, क्योंकि उसके पास कुछ कोलैटरल देने के लिए था नहीं, वो कुछ दे नहीं पाता था. ठीक है, और उसका रिस्क भी ज्यादा था कि वो डिफॉल्ट हो जाएगा क्योंकि वो ऑलरेडी गरीब है. ठीक है, ही डजंट हैव सस्टेन सोर्स ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट. ठीक है, सो उसके डिफॉल्ट होने का पॉसिबिलिटी ज्यादा था. तो एक अकेला बंदा जो गरीब था वो जा रहा था बैंक में, तो उसको लोन नहीं मिलता था. ठीक है, बट देन व्हाट इफ वी कैन डेवलप समथिंग कॉल्ड SHG. SHG मतलब सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप. सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप मतलब क्या? few people, I mean especially from the poorer sections of society, If they come together, few people from the poorer sections of society, if they come together and they develop a group, and that group goes and collectively takes a loan from the bank, where every individual takes a guarantee of every other individual, where every individual in the group takes a guarantee of every other individual. ठीक है कि अगर ये नहीं पे करेगा तो मैं करूंगा, ठीक है, उसके बिहाफ पे मैं मतलब आई विल डिवाइड द लोन अमंग्स्ट ईच ऑफ अस. अगर वो नहीं पे करेगा तो हम लोग सब डिवाइड करेंगे, ठीक है. दैट इज समथिंग कॉल्ड एज एसएचजी. एंड यूजुअली ऑल दिस एसएचजी सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप, ठीक है, दे यूज्ड टू गेट यूनाइटेड एंड फॉर्म वन पर्टिकुलर बिजनेस. एक वो लोग एक ही, वो सब एसएचजी साथ में मिलके, जो भी लोग है एसएचजी में, वो सब साथ में मिलके एक ही बिजनेस चलाते हैं, ठीक है. वन एंड many of these SHGs, much of these SHGs were women led. ठीक है, so they were women exclusive SHG. मतलब they were women from the poorer section of society who used to come together, ask for the loans from the bank and run one single business. Many of these SHGs have become successful and they have been able to eradicate poverty to a considerable extent. Can anyone give me an example of an SHG which has become successful? Self-help group which has become successful. Any example have you heard of? If you have heard of. Legit, very true. Ravi, Harshit, correct. The answer is correct. Legit Papad. Have you guys heard of this Legit Papad? वो Legit Papad क्या है? It's nothing but a company which is run by an SHG, woman-led SHG. Okay, and they have become really successful, right? They have become really successful. Okay, so that's an example. And under that PM Mudra Yojana, basically, I don't know, Mythicool, I've not heard of this Mythicool, but legit I have heard of. The other is Kudumbashree from Kerala, very famous. Kudumshree. One is Amma Canteen from Tamil Nadu, very famous. Okay, so these are famous SHGs. Even the, I mean, the reports of Niti Aayog, they have mentioned about these SHGs. Okay, so yes, a famous SHG, and they have become successful. And one of the ways in which the government is promoting this SHG and government has promoted women entrepreneurship is by PM Mudra Yojana, in which women-led SHGs especially are given financial support. PM Mudra Yojana. In fact, there is also something called as Mudra Bank, in which women can go and take the loan. Women and women-led SHGs can go and take the loans. Are you getting it? With all these things, we are trying to generate employment in the country. We are trying to develop more employment in the country. Have you understood this? Have you understood this? If yes, type clear in the chat box. Great, nice. Yes, let's go to the next part. Okay, now there is Q&A. So let's do one thing, Q&A. Either we can do it right now or maybe we can do it later. Okay, let me do one thing. Let's discuss right now itself the part of the, just let me show you a few changes which has been made to the repo rate and reverse repo. Fine, give me a minute. Let me just open the Google Chrome. Stop sharing for this. One second, guys, just 1 second. There's one Indian Express article which I like to show to you. And the website of RBI, I like to. Okay. Okay, recent income tax reform. I mean, the one which Modi ji very recently announced. We can discuss that. We can discuss it. But let's do one thing. Let's discuss them at the right time. I mean, जब भी income tax वगैरह discuss करेंगे, जब भी government taxation वगैरह discuss करेंगे, at that time, I guess it will be better. Okay, basically, what in just in brief, if I tell you, Arshit, what Modi ji were trying to do is basically he was trying to maintain anonymity and trying to reduce corruption. That was what his intention was. How can that be done? If in case, basically, matlab, earlier what used to happen, people, if they have any kind of disputes with the income tax department, they used to visit the local income tax authorities. जहाँ पे वहाँ पे एक local IRS officer who used to sit there and used to and people used to present the case there. So there was high possibility when you know that who is the IT officer who is going to deal with your case. There is a possibility of corruption there, right? Like you can always try to bribe him कि मेरा केस माफ करो सर, एक काम करो आप इतना रखो और मेरे मामले को रफा दफा करो. That is what people used to do until now. But now, if you increase anonymity, कि आपका IT suppose कुछ भी dispute है आपका, so वो dispute किधर भी जा सकता है, उसका case अगर आपको if you have to make any kind of appeals, ठीक है, उसका case किधर भी जा सकता है. Any random IT officer in the entire country, with the help of like technology, we have been able to do this. That the case can be sent to any random IT officer in the country. Now you do not know exactly which IT officer will be dealing with your case, and in that situation, you can't go to any officer and you can talk to that officer कि आप सर थोड़ा पैसा लेके लेन देन करके मामले को रफा दफा करो. That is what you can't do. This is what the new tax reform is about. Income tax reform is about. But then details of this we'll discuss in one of the later lectures. We'll discuss about this. Have you understood whatever we discussed briefly? Arshit? Yes, of course, Kiran. That's an amazing thing which Modi ji has done. It's really, it was, in fact, it was already in process. It was already being done. But then this is a like putting into implementation. That's really cool. That's really nice. So let's read about this. Let's have a look. So RBI का policy rates, जो bi-monthly policy review होता है, ठीक है, MPC का, Monetary Policy Committee का, उसका very recently this guy Shaktikant Das, he came on the TV and informed the country about the recent decisions of the about the rates of the Monetary Policy Committee that very recently Shaktikant Das informed the country about. ठीक है, उसमें क्या है? So policy rates, policy repo rate is 4% this time. It has been left unchanged. ठीक है, reverse repo is also 3.35. Marginal standing facility is 4.25. Bank rate is 4.25. I guess मेरे ख्याल से ये MSF और बैंक रेट नहीं हुआ ना अपना. I guess ये नहीं हुआ. ठीक है, so ये anyways वो the general class I have dealt in that class. ठीक है, but then I guess for you guys we'll deal with this later. Don't worry. For you at least you try and remember this. Policy rate, reverse repo rate, वो सब ध्यान में रखो अभी. And the next is reserve ratios. Yes, look at the CRR and the SLR. CRR कितना है? 3% है. SLR is 18%. We know what is CRR. We know what is SLR. Okay, so this is something which all of these things have been left unchanged in the recent Monetary Policy Committee report. And let me show you even one more thing. This is the article. Yes, this is the article which came last week. Swami, you can ask me the question maybe in the tail end of the lecture. Or else if we are dealing with current affairs right now, you can ask me the question right now itself. If it will be something pertaining to economics or something or nearby to the topics which we are discussing, I'll deal with it right now itself. Swami, you can ask me the question right now. Okay, yes. So the topic is explained why the RBI has left the interest rate unchanged. So now I want you guys to have a look at this article. ठीक है, ये Express का article है. Yes, it's Indian Express. ठीक है, तो ये देख लो ये article क्या है. The RBI has kept the interest rates on hold on Thursday, seeking to contain a rise in the inflation even as growth remains concerned. अभी situation क्या है? We all of us know that growth of the country is going down. ठीक है, and there is no positive. It's in fact it's contracting. It's even in fact going in the negative arena. So जब भी growth नीचे जा रहा है तो growth को again propel करने के लिए government क्या कर रहा है? RBI क्या कर रहा है? It is trying to pump money into the market. But when RBI is trying to pump money into the market, what has happened? जब भी RBI when it pumps money into the market, by me when I say pumping money into the market, इसका मतलब क्या? कि CRR कम करना, SLR कम करना, ठीक है, repo rate, reverse repo rate ये सब कम रखना, ताकि banks do not keep the money with the RBI, rather banks give the money to the economy. So that's basically giving more liquidity in the economy. उससे गवर्नमेंट एंड आरबीआई वाज एक्सपेक्टिंग ग्रोथ बढ़ेगा, बट हुआ क्या, उल्टा हुआ. सिचुएशन उल्टी हुई. सिचुएशन क्या उल्टा है, ग्रोथ नहीं बढ़ा, इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ गया. ठीक है, इन्फ्लेशन हैज गॉन बियॉन्ड 6% लिमिट. डू यू रिमेंबर दैट 2% to 6% वाला हम लोगों ने जो पढ़ा था एमपीसी में, मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी कमेटी में. ठीक है, inflation has already gone beyond 6%. It is what? It rose to 6.09 from 5.84 in March. In June, inflation rose to 6.09 from 5.84 in March. So already it was at the border. 5.84 was at the border in March. ठीक है, अभी rates इतने ज्यादा कम हो चुके हैं कि the inflation has gone at 6.01. Basically, we can say 6.1% जितना inflation हो चुका है. ठीक है, so inflation has gone beyond the 6% limit. Now even RBI is in a perplex. RBI is in a doubt कि अभी क्या करना चाहिए ये सिचुएशन में, what should we do. ठीक है, considering the fact कि अभी ग्रोथ तो बढ़ाना है, बट एट द सेम टाइम इन्फ्लेशन कंट्रोल करना है. सो आरबीआई ने क्या किया, आरबीआई केप्ट द रेट्स अनचेंज्ड. हैव यू अंडरस्टूड दिस? ये हम लोगों ने a bit of this we have already discussed previously. I want you guys to read this article. This it's there on online. You'll be able to see this. Explain why the RBI has left the interest rate unchanged. Cool. I just told you in brief what was the idea behind this. Have you understood this? If yes, type clear. Type clear in the chat box. इसका जो स्टैटिक वाला पार्ट था वो हमने ऑलरेडी पहले समझा. But then जो connecting static with current, that is what is required, and you guys will have to read this. That's sort of your homework. Oh, cool. Fine. So let's do one thing. Let me switch to the other topic after employment wala. Yes. Okay, can you guys see the shared screen? Okay, there's a doubt. Okay, Swami has asked a question about India-China situation. See, Swami, okay. Yes. Let me answer you by saying this. We know this thing that China is, of course, the dominant player in the goods segment, at least, not just in India, but across the world. China is a dominant player. And when China is a dominant player, not just in India, across the world, as far as the goods is concerned, in the software segment, we were the dominant ones. We were supposed to be the ones who were good in the IT, in the coding and everything. We were supposed to be good. But then off late, we are even seeing this thing that China is trying to capture that market as well. Because China has many such apps with which it's trying to capture the global market. If we can stall that, or even to a certain extent, stop the pace with which it is doing it, and give some opportunity to the Indian players to try and reclaim their position in the service segment also, that would be good. So although I do not expect a very big mammoth and very big change in the scenario of the basically hurting China. But then I do feel this thing that banning apps, Chinese apps in India, will give an opportunity to Indian app makers to at least perform and bridge that gap. Okay, because India is also a big market. So I do agree with you partially. We won't be able to hurt Chinese economy that much, but at least we are giving our Indians a chance to try and compete with the other Chinese players, at least in the local economy. So if, for example, you must be aware, there is an app called as Cam Scanner. You must be aware. You must have used that app also. Basically, it tries to convert the images into PDF images which you have which you take from the screen. That's basically Cam Scanner. Okay, so वो Cam Scanner app, it was a Chinese app. It is banned now. Okay, and we have an Indian alternative already available. Okay, that was like Kagaz app. Okay, there is an Indian alternative. Maybe Kagaz app is the alternative, or there is one more Doc Scanner or something like that also. Okay, which is also an Indian alternative. Similarly, Share It, you knew. Everyone has Share It. Everyone has used Share It once in their lifetime. Okay, but I say Share It ka hi, agar suppose Indian alternative we are able to make, आई एम नॉट सेइंग शेयर इट बैन करने से चाइना को बहुत ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट हो गया या फिर कैम स्कैनर को बैन करने के चाइना को बहुत ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट हो गया, बट एटलीस्ट वी आर ट्राइंग टू get ourselves strengthened, right? So if we can do that, that will be good. Are you getting it? Swami, I to a certain extent agree to your point of view that in the goods also we should try and compete with them. And we should also try and ensure this thing that in the goods segment also, we try and ensure that these guys, I mean, we are able to compete with them not just in India, but in the international market also. But at least for the first step, it's something which is good. Why I'm saying this? Because you also will have to toe the line with the government's move, right? You in the examination or in the interview, you cannot take a stand which is anti-government. ये याद रखो. ठीक है, anti-establishment stand मत लेना in the mains or in the interview कहीं पे भी. अगर हो सके तो government, suppose if you are pushed to a situation where you are asked to give your opinion, then give an opinion which is favorable to the government. You give an opinion which is favorable to the government. You ask me especially why, because I have faced this kind of questions in the interview. जो आपने, have you read the very recent UPSC का news? Do you know there is a new UPSC chairman, by the way? There's a new UPSC chairman. What is the name of the new UPSC chairman? Can anyone tell me? PK Joshi. It's PK Joshi. Yes. So that was the guy who had, जब अभी chairman तो usually interview लेते नहीं है, but he was also the member earlier. He's like last 5-6 years he has been the member. उसके पहले वो झारखंड PSC के भी member रह चुके हैं. ठीक है. He was the guy who had taken my interview, and I know what kind of delicate questions he tend to ask. Controversial questions वो पूछता था. ठीक है. तो जब भी ऐसा कोई controversial question, when you are asked and you are asked to give an answer to that, just remember this thing, that you are not supposed to give a stand exactly countering the government. ठीक है. Why? Because there are high chances कि जो panel में लोग हैं, they are the ones who are the confidants of the government. ठीक है. They won't be hearing anything negative to the government. ठीक है. So try to build that attitude, even if you have that personal opinion completely against the government, which even to a certain extent I have. ठीक है. But then try to defend that thing in your mind itself. This will also make you understand both the positives and negatives of the same. This will help you understand that. Yes, I guess Mukesh Ambani ko, yes, even I read that. In fact, in India, it is trying to sell it to Ambani, and internationally, it is trying to sell to Microsoft, I guess. और बीच में मेरे ख्याल से ट्विटर का भी बात चल रहा है. Even Twitter was involved, so it was not Ambani, and internationally they are thinking of, Microsoft is thinking of purchasing it. Donald Trump ने तो बोला भी है कि ये कट ऑफ डेट है. मेरे ख्याल से सितंबर का कुछ तो डेट था. ठीक है. And after that, TikTok will be banned unless it is bought by some US firm, most likely this. For sure, Kunal, forgive me. Yeah, actually, I'll ensure that I'll do that. Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's continue with the next topic. The next topic is, yes, BOP. BOP मतलब क्या? Balance of payments. Balance of payments. Let's try to understand this. क्या है ये topic? Okay. Okay. Yes, Dhruva, you can also write this stand. You can also write this thing in the exam. That considering India's situation, America ने भी ऐसा किया है. See, I guess even if they say so, TikTok even if says so, okay, they won't leave USA. Against US government, they cannot operate in US, I guess. And US government is rather more stricter than India's. US government is more stricter than India's. Okay, India has been, हम लोग actually, I shouldn't venture into that area, but let me tell you one thing about the data theft. ये ऐसा नहीं है कि हम लोग अभी मालूम पड़ा है, just January में कि data theft हो रहा है वो सब apps से. हम लोग को उसके पहले से बहुत पहले से मालूम था that all of these apps are they are taking India's data and processing it and all. Okay, so we already knew about this. We already knew since ages. Okay, but the problem was that we weren't taking any kind of action. Yes, Galwan Clash was the trigger, but we weren't taking any kind of actions. Why? Because we did not have domestic alternatives also in that competition. In that situation, we did not have domestic alternatives. अब ऐसा नहीं है कि यूएस के भी बहुत सारे फॉर्म्स they are accused of data theft. Facebook is accused of data theft कि Facebook इंडिया से बहुत ज्यादा डेटा उठा के लेके जा रहा है. गूगल कितना सारा इंडिया का डेटा वगैरह उठा के फ्री में उठा के लेके जा रहा है, ठीक है, एंड वी आर नॉट taking any kind of hard stand against that. Why? Because nothing antagonistic happened between India and USA. Something antagonistic, something bad happened between India and China. That's the reason why it triggered us to do that. ठीक है, but then ऐसा यूएस के साथ नहीं हुआ, or else even US is threatening our data policies. Okay, so I guess this Chinese debate can go endlessly. Yeah, they can keep on going endlessly. Now let's move on. Let's go to the BOP wala part. Maybe in the last 10-15 minutes again, we'll again discuss about some current affairs wala topic. Fine. Until then, let's try to deal with economy. Fine. So let's start with this. Acha, BOP, we are starting the topic. The name of the topic is BOP. Can anyone guess? सिर्फ ऐसा कोई तुक्का मार सकता है क्या कि BOP का full form क्या रहेगा? What will be the full form of BOP? Very true, Vedant. Correct, Nakul. Right, true that. Ravi, yes. So many of you guys, बहुत सारे लोगों को मालूम है. अच्छा है, अच्छी बात है. BOP stands for balance of payments. BOP stands for balance of payments. ठीक है, और देखते हैं ये क्या है. ये आज, in fact, I deliberately took this topic today. Yes, balance of payment. अच्छा, I must have said it already. But then, anyways, so BOP का full form है balance of payments. इसका एक और रीजन आज इसके लिए है because today morning Modi ji gave a speech in which he insisted a lot upon Atmanirbhar Bharat. ठीक है, Atmanirbhar Bharat. So we'll try to understand this कि क्या है Atmanirbhar Bharat और BOP वगैरह में ये कहाँ पे फिक्स होता है. शायद से पूरा चैप्टर हम लोग एक बार पढ़ लेंगे. उसके बाद we'll also discuss once कि Atmanirbhar Bharat, I mean स्वावलंबी movement, ठीक है, and स्वदेशी idea, the idea of स्वदेशी जो 100 years back 1905 में चालू हुआ था, क्या कितना रिलेवेंट है ये आज, कितना रिलेवेंट है. ठीक है, so we'll discuss that also. Okay, so let's vocal for local. ये सब जागत याद रखो, vocal for local, आत्मनिर्भर भारत. ठीक है, so ये सारे जागत याद रखो. You can write this in the exam. If you start your any answer about Atmanirbhar Bharat and if you write vocal for local, that will really impress the exam. ठीक है, तो मोदी जी बोल रहे हैं वो याद रखो कि he said this thing, he said that. You can quote that honorable in the words of honorable Prime Minister Pradhan Mantri Modi, and you can write he said vocal for local, something like that. That will be a good introduction at least. Okay, so let's start with this. Yes, contents क्या रहेगा इसका? So we'll try to understand what is BOP. We'll try to understand what is BOP. Then what is the need for maintaining BOP? What is the need for maintaining balance of payments? The next is components of balance of payments. We'll try to understand this. We'll try to discuss this components of balance of payment. There is something called as current account balance. So आगे आएगा वो समझेंगे हम लोग. Okay, also there is something called as capital account balance. That is also a part of it. We'll try to understand this. Then there is associated terms. Every question, every topic, we tend to discuss associated terms. आज इसमें भी होगा. And the last will be the Q&A. Last will be Q&A, questions and answers. So we'll see. Let's see हम लोग कितना आगे समझ सकते हैं, how much we can read and understand about this. ठीक है, so starting about the definition of BOP, the definition of balance of payment. Yes. So balance of payment का मतलब क्या है? Balance of payment का मतलब क्या है? So the balance of payment, also known as balance of international payments and abbreviated as BOP of a country, is the difference between all money flowing into a country in a particular period of time, example a quarter or a year, and the outflow of the money to the rest of the world. So it's nothing but the difference between what? Difference between two things. क्या दो चीज? एक तो ये that all money flowing into the country in a particular period of time and outflow of the money from that country to the rest of the world. So basically, if I can say in other words, it's nothing but a transaction of one country with the rest of the world. If one country is like an individual entity, so उसका transaction किसी और country के साथ या फिर rest of the world के साथ कैसा है, that shows the idea of BOP. That is nothing but the idea of BOP. Balance of payments. Balance of payment मतलब क्या? It's not like GDP. GDP क्या था? GDP मतलब इंडिया कितना wealth एक साल में डेवलप कर रहा है, that was GDP. ठीक है, but on the other hand BOP मतलब क्या? BOP का मतलब ये, balance of payment का मतलब ये कि इंडिया एक साल में दूसरे कंट्री के साथ कितना ट्रांजेक्शन कर रहा है, कितना पैसा दूसरे कंट्री को दिया और कितना पैसा दूसरे कंट्री से लिया. That's the idea of BOP. That's the idea of balance of payments. Okay. So let's start reading this. That's the reason why, see, now after this poverty and unemployment, I really felt the need कि थोड़ा static topic हो गया है. So अभी एक ऐसा कोई topic लेते हैं जो economy का I mean depth of economy वाला topic is sort of again the hardcore economics which we used to see earlier. Okay, so that's the reason why, just to break the monotony, just to make the lectures more interesting, I shifted to this topic. Let's try and understand this. Okay. So balance of payment is a statement of, in other words, it can also be said to be, balance of payment is a statement of all transactions made between entities in one country and the rest of the world over a defined period of time, such as a quarter or a year. So that's what we read about. Okay, it's nothing but statement of transactions. बेसिकली अकाउंट्स ऑफ ट्रांजेक्शंस के मैंने इंडिया से मैंने पूरे वर्ल्ड से कितना हम लोग ने पैसे भेजे और वर्ल्ड ने इंडिया में मुझे कितने पैसे भेजे. फाइन. सो दैट्स द अकाउंट ऑफ दैट ट्रांजेक्शन इज नथिंग बट बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट्स. बट इट्स नॉट दैट सिंपल. इट्स समथिंग व्हिच इज वेरी कॉम्प्लिकेटेड. लेट्स ट्राई एंड अंडरस्टैंड दिस. क्या है ये बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट्स? सो व्हाट इज द नीड फॉर मेंटेनिंग बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट? इसका व्हाट इज द नीड फॉर even keeping this balance of payment? The need is this, that in the modern world, there is hardly any country which is self-sufficient in the sense that it produces all goods and services it needs. See, this is what the idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat is, right? Atmanirbhar Bharat kya bolta hai? Try to develop many things by your own in India. India should be Atmanirbhar and being less reliant on the world. Okay, but then in the modern times, in the modern world, there is hardly any country which is self-sufficient, 100% self-sufficient, in the sense that it produces all the goods and services it needs. Hardly कोई country ऐसा है जो पूरा आत्मनिर्भर. बहुत कम ऐसे countries है जो पूरे, even China जैसा चाइना जो इतना mammoth industrial power है, इतना goods and services बनाता है और export करता है. Even China to a certain extent is dependent upon the rest of the world. China imports the raw materials from India, from Africa, from Australia. तो वो सब raw materials सब जगह से वो लोग मंगा रहे. Are you getting? Sure. Just one second, Mehak. Okay, just let me know once you're done with this. Guys, even if you have missed any particular slide, please let me know. I just have a sip of water. Mehak, are you done? Okay, great. Yes. So what is the need for maintaining BOP? What is the need for maintaining these transactions? A country makes with the rest of the world, वो सब transactions रखने का मतलब क्या है? उसके पीछे reason क्या है? So in the modern world, there is hardly any country which is self-sufficient in the sense that it produces all the goods and services it needs. कोई country hardly ऐसा country है जो self-sufficient है. उसको सारे के सारे जो भी goods उसको खुद को चाहिए वो उसके पास ही है. ऐसा नहीं है. Every country has to transact with the rest of the world. ठीक है? Every country imports from other countries the goods that cannot be produced at all in the country or can be produced only at an unduly high cost as compared to the foreign supplies. मतलब हर कंट्री को दूसरे कंट्री के ऊपर डिपेंडेंट रहना ही पड़ता. कोई भी मतलब कुछ ना कुछ ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि आप पिन से लेके रॉकेट तक सब कुछ आप अपने ही कंट्री में बना रहे हो. कोई तो चीज के लिए यू हैव टू बी डिपेंडेंट ऑन द रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. ठीक है? एंड सिमिलरली अ कंट्री एक्सपोर्ट्स वन सेकंड. Similarly, a country exports to the other countries the commodities which those countries prefer to buy from abroad rather than producing at home. Okay, so a country exports to other countries the commodities which those countries prefer to buy from abroad rather than producing at home. Are you getting it? So एक कंट्री दूसरे कंट्री से इंपोर्ट भी करता है, एक कंट्री दूसरे कंट्री को एक्सपोर्ट भी करता है, क्योंकि एक कंट्री, एनी कंट्री, हार्डली across the world, any country is not entirely self-reliant. It always depends on some other country for either imports or exports. Okay. Besides the trade of goods and services, there are flows of capital also. So capital भी flow होता है. मतलब it's not just goods and services जो import or export होता है. Even capital gets transferred from one country to another. Capital मतलब पैसे, even पैसे gets transferred from one country to another. Okay. The best example is remittance. Remittance also gets transferred from India to abroad, some other country abroad. Okay. So it's not just goods and services. A country also transacts with some other country based on the amount of capital goes from that country to some other country. Okay, see, foreign capital flows are in the form of portfolio investment by foreign institutional investors or in the form of foreign direct investment. Okay, now this is foreign capital flows. ये FII or FDI वाला part वो हम लोग बाद में देखेंगे. ठीक है, but right now just understand why do we need to maintain BOP? उसका आंसर ये है because no country is completely self-reliant. No country is 100% आत्मनिर्भर और स्वदेशी. Every country has to depend on some other country. Okay, and that's the reason why we have to maintain BOP. That's the reason we have to maintain balance of payments. Okay. So yes, so that was the need of BOP. Components of BOP. Let's try to understand this. क्या है components of? Okay, so yes. Sorry. Okay. कितने लोगों ने सुबह को पूरा मोदी जी का स्पीच सुना? That's great. I mean, he declared many things. He declared good. Just one quick question. मोदी जी ने स्पीच में जो बोला कि मैं इतने पैसे ये स्कीम में दे रहा हूँ या फिर मैं इतने पैसे वो स्कीम में दे रहा हूँ, वो क्या है? Is that a what type of policy is that? What type of policy? Is it a fiscal policy or a monetary policy? I hope you recall मोदी जी ने स्कीम्स के बारे में बोला कि हम लोग डिफेंस में इतना पैसा दे रहे हैं, इसमें इतना पैसा दे रहे हैं. Yes, very true. That is also a part of fiscal policy. That is also a part of fiscal policy. So it's a part of fiscal policy, but the best, I mean, the glaring example of fiscal policy, or in general, the most mammoth step taken by a country in an entire year, taken by a government in the entire year in the arena of economics, is budget. So, but many times, budget in common terms is also called as fiscal policy. Okay, budget is also called as fiscal policy. So it's basically interchangeable. Many times, if they don't make use of the term budget, they make use of the term fiscal policy instead of budget. So try to understand fiscal policy actually is an umbrella term. It includes many steps taken by the government, also includes budget, also includes random announcement made by the government. It also includes that. But if at any place, if you tend to find budget nahi likha hai or fiscal policy likha hai, so it's not entirely wrong. The words are interchangeable. Okay, great. So let's move on. Let's go to the next slide. Next is components of BOP, components of balance of payments. So these are the two primary components of balance of payments. First is the current account and the second is the capital account. First is current account and the second is capital account. So let's try to understand each of these in detail. Okay. So current account includes, current account क्या होता है? Current account क्या होता है? Current account includes the transactions of goods and services, income between the residents and the rest of the world. So basically goods and services का transaction जो भी हो रहा है या फिर income यहाँ से वहाँ किसी भी country में से कोई country में से दूसरे country में जा रहा है, ठीक है? So that is nothing but what the part of current account. ठीक है? Current account balance is largely driven by movements of goods and services. ठीक है? तो goods और सर्विसेज अगर एक कंट्री दूसरे कंट्री में भेज रहा है या फिर दूसरे कंट्री से इंपोर्ट कर रहा है, दैट इज अ पार्ट ऑफ करंट अकाउंट. दैट इज अ पार्ट ऑफ करंट अकाउंट. ठीक है? सो इट कैन बी सरप्लस और इट कैन बी डेफिसिट. ये करंट अकाउंट सरप्लस भी हो सकता है या फिर करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट भी हो सकता है. नाउ थियोरेटिकली द कैप शुड बी जीरो, बट इन द रियल वर्ल्ड दिस इज इम्प्रोबेबल. ठीक है? थियोरेटिकल अगर आत्मनिर्भर भारत हो गया और स्वदेशी हो गया एंड वी आर नॉट इंपोर्टिंग एनीथिंग और एक्सपोर्टिंग एनीथिंग टू द रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, okay, then we can expect the current account balance to be zero. Or if we are importing in the equal amount as we are exporting, अगर exact जितना हम लोग import कर रहे हैं उतना ही exactly हम लोग export कर रहे हैं, then the CAB can be zero, ठीक है. But then it's in the real world, it's rarely possible कि कोई country इतना self sufficient हो, ठीक है. So theoretically CAB should be zero, but in the real world this is improbable. The current account has a surplus or a deficit. It tells us something. Okay, Kunal, I'll surely repeat, but then current account वाला topic खत्म नहीं हुआ. So आगे भी एक दो slides हैं, maybe at that point of time it will be further more clear. Let's do one thing. In fact, let's do one thing. ये जो दो paragraphs है वो paragraph बाद में पढ़ेंगे. ठीक है. At this moment, let's focus on this itself. Current account क्या है? Current account. The current account includes the transactions of goods and services, income from the residents. Basically, income from residents मतलब remittance. Remittance, I hope you guys know what is remittance. Just tell me quickly in the chat box. Remittance क्या है? What is remittance? I guess we have discussed this term. Remittance क्या होता है? Okay, have we discussed the term remittance? Sum of money, nahi, but very weak. Sum is very weak. What is remittance? Have we discussed this? Like payment, sum of money, like payment. Nahi, elaborate. Grants bhi nahi hai. I guess we haven't discussed remittance, right? Have we? Okay, Lisa says the PPT is not visible. Is there some problem with the PPT? Can you see the shared screen? Lisa, just have a look. I guess. Okay, why don't you do one thing? You can log out and log in. Try logging in once. If you are still facing some problem, Lisa, you can log out and log in once. I'll admit you. I'll admit you. Great. Even if there is later, if there is some concern, I'll stop sharing and maybe share in more time. Okay. So yeah. So remittance क्या होता है? Remittance, let me tell you. I guess यहाँ पर discuss नहीं हुआ. That's the reason why I'm getting different replies. But then remittance exactly क्या है? Remittance. Okay. Yes. Sanvi, now you're correct. When a person sends money from abroad to his family, that's correct. That's correct. Transfer of money, very true. That's nothing but transfer of money. But transfer of money कहाँ से कहाँ? Basically, if there is a migrant from India, an Indian who has gone to USA and working there in USA, earning there in USA, and sending some amount of money back to his family in India. US में एक बंदा काम कर रहा है और वो इंडिया का एक बंदा यूएस में जाके काम कर रहा है और वहां पे पैसे कमा के इंडिया में उसकी फैमिली को वापस पैसे भेज रहा है. That is remittance. Yes, the idea of migration and migrants. Very true, Mike. It's pertaining to the idea of migration and migrants. Okay. So US make someone is working in USA, sending the money back to his family in India. That is remittance. वो US में काम कर रहा है और अपने फैमिली को इंडिया में भेज रहा है. That is. अच्छा, yes, मानस, very true. मानस, I guess हम लोगों ने वो डिस्कस किया था. कोई तो डॉक्टर चार्ल्स और डॉक्टर रमेश वो वाला एग्जाम्पल कुछ याद है? एनडीपी वगैरह. एनडीपी तो तभी मेरे ख्याल से हम लोग ने रेमिटेंस डिस्कस किया. बट यस, एनीवेज सो ऐसे ही अगर सपोज गुड्स हम लोग दूसरे कंट्री को बेचेंगे और वहां से गुड्स खरीदेंगे या फिर सर्विस दूसरे कंट्री को बेचेंगे और वहां से खरीदेंगे, ठीक है. सो या फिर वहां से कोई बंदा कमा के इंडिया में अपनी फैमिली को पैसे भेज रहा है. ऑल दिस इज अ पार्ट ऑफ करंट अकाउंट. डॉक्टर चार्ल्स फ्रॉम यूएसए. यस, वेरी ट्रू, मैक. Dr. Charles from US. Oh, just one second. Someone, she was there in the waiting room. I didn't add her. Lisa, are you there in the here or have I? Yes, she's here. Yes, that's great. That's great. Okay, so yeah, we were discussing about current account. So now let's go to the next slide. These two paragraphs we'll read. Maybe after a couple of slides, we'll read these two paragraphs again. Okay, let's go to the next paragraph. So BOP is further divided. I hope you can see the screen now. I hope, Lisa, can you see the screen now? Oh, that's great. So BOP is further divided. I mean, the current account is further divided into something called as visibles and invisibles. Visibles and invisibles. So visibles matlab kya? Basically goods. Invisibles matlab the items which are non-tangible. Okay, they are services. They are services. Okay, so matlab टेल मी दिस थिंग, इंडिया एक कंट्री वेल्थ कब कमा रहा है? एक कंट्री वेल्थ कमाएगा कभी जब ही वो गुड्स प्रोड्यूस करके बाहर कोई कंट्री में बेच रहा है, या फिर वो बाहर का कोई भी गुड्स प्रोड्यूस करके इंडिया में वो इंपोर्ट कर रहा है. सो यस, वेरी ट्रू, यू गाइस आर करेक्ट. नहीं, आई मीन earlier Himanshu you wrote a correct answer. When will a country gain wealth? When the country will export or when a country will import? Export करेगा तभी country wealth gain करेगा या फिर import करेगा तभी country wealth gain करेगा? Yes, all of you guys are correct. The answer is exports. When a country exports some goods, it gets wealth in return. That's at the time when the country actually earns. That's the time when the country actually earns. So in case of visibles, the goods का जो visible part है. So goods visible, maybe it can be goods exports or good imports. It can be goods exports or good imports. And during the time of good exports, a country gains wealth. During the time of goods imports, when we are taking the good from some other country to India, when we're bringing the goods from some other country to India, that's goods import. And that's the time we lose wealth. We send the wealth to some other country. We lose wealth, we send the wealth to some other country. The same is true about invisibles also. The same is true about invisibles also, service also. When India exports services to some other country, basically India gives services to some resident of USA. That is an example of what? Service export. And when Indians take the benefit of some service of US or some service of Swiss bank or something like that, that's service import. Okay, we lose wealth. We lose wealth when we do service import, and we gain wealth when we do service export. When we do service export. Okay, let's read each of these individually. Let's try to read visibles wala part. So visibles trade, I mean visibles current account, visibles trade, or also called as merchandise transactions. Okay, ये क्या है? It is a major part of transaction in foreign trade and is in the form of export and imports of goods, which is visible item. Okay, the money earned from Indian exports of goods, for example, cars sold to Nepal. If India is sending some money to some cars to Nepal, and those cars have been bought in Nepal, okay, that will be added, that will be accredited. That will be credited in this account. That will be added in this account. While payments made for the imported goods, example, American aircraft sold in India, that will be debited. That will be debited in this account. Are you getting it? Yes, Kiran, very true. Exports should be more than the imports. Exports should be more than the imports. क्योंकि वो टाइम पे the country will gain wealth. The country will gain wealth. In this example also we read this thing कि जब India नेपाल को कुछ कार बेचेगा, that will be credited or added to the BOP, balance of payment account. ठीक है. On the other hand, India USA एक aircraft खरीद रहा है. India is purchasing any aircraft from USA. So India is importing, and that will be debited, or that will be negated in this balance of payment account. Are you getting it? That's the truth about, that's the fact about merchandise transactions or visible trade. Okay, that's what I was telling you. Okay, export करेगा तभी country wealth gain कर रहा है, और that will be added in the balance of payment account. Okay, or let's read about the invisibles part. Invisibles, it includes large variety of non-factor services known as invisible items, sold and purchased by the residents of a country to and from the rest of the world. Example, payments are either received or made to the other countries for use of these services. Okay, so as a services, just like in the case of goods, we also have the export and import of services. Example is here. For example, the income earned from the sale of Indian services abroad is known as invisible exports. Example, insurance premium paid by a British ship owner to an Indian broker. Maybe not just broker, let's consider an Indian insurance company. अगर एक Indian insurance company is giving the service of insurance to a British ship owner, कोई British ship जा रहा है, ठीक है, उसको एक Indian insurance company insurance दे रहा है. So Indian insurance company is giving service to the British ship owner. So that will be sort of an example of what? Service export. We have insurance, we have given the service of insurance, we have exported the service of insurance, Indian service of insurance, to some Britisher, to some British ship owner. That's an example of export of services. ऐसे ही, what is an example of import of services? ठीक है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल वो अमिताभ बच्चन पे डॉक्टर वाला केस, दैट्स एन एग्जाम्पल ऑफ व्हाट इम्पोर्ट ऑफ सर्विसेज. When Indian residents spend money on foreign services, example, a week's accommodation in London, they are creating invisible imports because payment is going out of India. For example, if you go to some place and you visit some place, maybe London or Paris or some other place, if you visit, okay, let's consider London. Why? Because we are considered British. Okay, so if you go to London and if you stay there, if you stay in some hotel, so you're taking the benefit of what? You're taking the benefit of their hospitality service. You're taking the benefit of their hospitality service. तुम वहां के कोई भी होटल वगैरह का तुम वहां पे रह रहे हो, वहां पे तुम ट्रैवल वगैरह कर रहे हो, तो आप किसमें यू विल बी स्पेंडिंग इन पाउंड्स, राइट? सो बेसिकली यू आर what is happening, you are importing services, you are importing service. तुम वहां का कोई तो होटल था, वो तुमको सर्विस दे रहा है and you are importing that service. Are you getting it? So just like goods can be exports and imports, ऐसे services can be exports and imports. And which is better in case of services? Is export better or import better? Which is better in case of services? Of course, export is better. Why? Because whenever we'll be exporting the best, Vedant, Shripad, Rupesh, Manas, correct, very true. Shraddha, very true. Export is better. Export is better because when we'll be exporting the service, we'll get wealth in return. We'll get some wealth in return. हम लोगों को कुछ पैसा मिलेगा in return. Fine. Yes, we'll gain wealth. So that's about बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट. हम लोगों ने करंट अकाउंट समझा. करंट अकाउंट में विजिबल्स एक पार्ट है और एक इनविजिबल्स. ठीक है, विजिबल्स में गुड्स आएगा, इनविजिबल्स में सर्विसेज आएगा. ठीक है, लेट्स गो टू द नेक्स्ट पार्ट. द नेक्स्ट इज जो ये बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट था उसमें लेट्स रीड द कैपिटल अकाउंट. लेट्स ट्राई एंड अंडरस्टैंड द कैपिटल अकाउंट. कैपिटल अकाउंट में क्या होता है? डिपेंड्स, डिपेंड्स कौन से कंट्री को तुम लोग भेज रहे हो. अगर सपोज डॉलर जैसा तुम इफ यू आर exporting and if you are getting foreign money which is dollar jaisa money in return, that is good to a certain extent. We can keep some amount of forex reserves. Forex reserves aage aayega वैसे. We can keep the forex reserves to a certain extent because US जैसा currency, dollar जैसा currency is not expected to fall in day or two, right? ठीक है, वो एक बहुत sturdy currency है. If anything happens to US तब जाके कुछ problem होगा डॉलर को. ठीक है, अगर suppose we are exporting to a country like North Korea. I don't even know the currency of North Korea. If we are exporting some currency to North Korea, और North Korea अपने को उसके local currency में अपने को पैसे दे रहा है, ठीक है, then yes, foreign currency is something which is of a threat, क्योंकि North Korea कभी कुछ भी हो सकता है. North Korea हाँ, but ये बहुत rare possibility है. But then North Korea को कुछ भी कभी भी कुछ भी हो सकता है. मे बी न्यूक्लियर वगैरह हो गया. डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प का एक बार सुबह उठ के उसका मूड खराब था और उसने न्यूक छोड़ दिया नॉर्थ कोरिया के ऊपर. सो उसको कुछ भी हो सकता है. एंड एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम यूएस आई मीन नॉर्थ कोरिया करेंसी का कुछ वैल्यू नहीं रहेगा. यस, देन देयर इज अ थ्रेट. But if you are exporting and taking in dollars, if you are taking in very reliable currency, then I guess there's not that much of a threat. There's not that much of a threat. Okay. Forex, and if your concern is about keeping very high forex reserves more than required, and maybe strengthening the dollar vis-a-vis Indian rupee, that is also concern which is well taken. Yes, I agree. Trump कर सकता है. By the way, I hope you know this thing. Last year, Trump was in a Twitter war with this Kim Jong Un. उसके साथ वो वॉर पे था. वो किम जोंग उन ने बोला था मेरे पास yes, red button on the table. That is very true. अच्छा उसका टेबल अच्छा वॉन I didn't knew that. I didn't knew that. Won is a currency. I didn't knew. Yes, that is very true. Red button on the table ये था ऐसा कि मेरे पास बटन है और ये डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प ने बोला मेरे पास तेरे से भी बड़ा बटन है. So I guess the people who are there at the leadership right now, वो तो मतलब बच्चों से भी गए गुजरे. बच्चों जैसे लड़ते थे. छोड़ो anyways. Yeah, we were discussing about forex reserves. If your doubt is who was that? Sripati, yes. About forex reserves, keeping more than required forex reserves. If your doubt is that, and basically indirectly strengthening dollar vis-a-vis Indian rupee. If your doubt is that, then I guess the RBI is someone who deals with the forex reserves in RBI. Time and again, whenever RBI feels this thing, Indian rupee बहुत ज़्यादा डूब रहा है, तभी आरबीआई वो रिजर्व्स को मार्केट में रिलीज करता है, रेड आई मीन डॉलर्स को मार्केट में रिलीज करता है एंड परचेसेस रुपीज इन रिटर्न. So if your doubt was that, then I guess then yes, still RBI makes some checks and balances. So let's continue with this. Yeah, we were discussing about the capital account. Capital account क्या होता है? So capital account of BOP records all those transactions between the residents of a country and the rest of the world, which causes a change in the assets or liabilities of the residents of the country or its government. Okay, which causes the change in the assets or liability. Now remember this thing. Here we are not talking about goods and services, exports and imports. We are talking about what we are talking about the increase or decrease in assets or liabilities of a country vis-a-vis rest of the world. Because we are talking about that. The next is it is related to claims and liabilities of financial nature. The capital account is concerned with financial transfers, and so it does not have direct effect on income, outputs, and employment of the country. Just remember this thing. जो अभी तक हम लोगों ने डिस्कस किया कि एक कंट्री दूसरे कंट्री के साथ डील करेगा, सो वो कंट्री दूसरे कंट्री से या तो फिर इंपोर्ट कर सकता है या एक्सपोर्ट कर सकता है, जो भी है ये सारी चीजें वो कर सकता है. गुड्स और सर्विसेज, इट कैन इंपोर्ट, it can export goods and services, everything can happen. But at the same time, ये सब पार्ट किसका था? That was a part of current account. Similarly, there can also be something called as capital account. There can also be capital account. इसमें क्या करेगा एक कंट्री अपने ऊपर या तो फिर लायबिलिटी बढ़ाएगा या फिर अपना एसेट अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड बढ़ा रहा है. ठीक है, it can do either of these things. It can increase or decrease its liabilities from the rest of the world or increase its capital, I mean assets across the world. Fine, even that is possible. So that all those things are part of capital account. We'll go more into it. We'll go into details of this. Okay, just one second. Ravi. Yes, yes. वो उनके साथ ऐसा हुआ था. He didn't attend. अभी मेरे ख्याल से अभी भी बीच में speculation हुआ था that he is dead or something has happened to him और ऐसा he is very severely ill. And many were saying कि उसकी sister will be the one who will take the lead and all. So ऐसा अभी speculation चल रहा था. उसके grandfather के funeral में नहीं गया था तभी भी ऐसा हुआ था. But it's very difficult for any information to come out of North Korea because it's a very closed, very tight economy. They barely give any information out. So it's very difficult. People can speculate, but then hardly they can confirm about it. And right now, I guess he has made public appearance of late, and people know this thing that he's fit and fine and he's come out. Okay, anyways, let's continue with this. Yes, so capital account kya hai? It's basically dealing with the assets and liabilities of a country. So an asset of the country can increase or decrease. The liability of a country can increase or decrease. Let's try to look into this further into detail. So yes, this can be further divided into something called as foreign investments and loan. Into something called as foreign investments and loan. I guess आज Q&A करने का time नहीं मिलेगा. Or we can deal with this topic later. What do you want to do? Should we switch to Q&A right now? We have still about 7 minutes left. How many of you guys want to go for Q&A? Maybe discuss some current affairs topics or something. Or if you want to stick to this, either type stick or switch. Just type either of the two. Switch. All of you guys unanimously are saying switch. ये skip करो, बहुत हो गया आज economics. ठीक है? In that case, yeah, let's deal with the capital account वाला part. Yes, the upcoming lecture will discuss this capital account वाला part. Okay, let's right now directly go to the. थोड़ा बाद में देख लेंगे. Let's discuss the Q&A. Do you want me to go to the previous slide? बहुत मैं आगे आ गया हूँ, but let me go to the previous. Which one? This one? Yes, guys. Any doubt? Anything in current affairs you want to discuss about? Which slide exactly, Kunal? The capital one? This one? Anything in news you want to discuss? Something in this or some of the topics, some of the subject, anything pertaining to UPSC you want to discuss about? Yes, guys. Any doubts? Anything pertaining to UPSC or anything. Okay, retail inflation 6.93% in July. Oh, that's, yeah, I think even I read that, Ravi. Even I read that. Manas is saying vaccine, Russia ने vaccine वगैरह declare किया. Yes, Ravi, see, let me draw your attention to Ravi's thing first. That yes, retail inflation hits 6.93 in July. मतलब it's even more. हम लोग ने अभी देखा था जून में it was 6.09. मतलब it was somewhere near 6.1. Now it's 6.9. मतलब almost 6.9 मतलब 0.8% point ये बढ़ गया. Okay, so it's much more than what was expected. It's much more than what was expected to be, and that is not a good situation. अभी RBI का भी ऐसा हो गया कि करे तो करे क्या, बोले तो बोले क्या, ठीक है? Because RBI has reduced the rates to that extent. In when you will be reading that article in the Indian Express wala thing, you will realize that RBI has reduced repo rate, reverse repo rate from the beginning of this year to 115 basis point. मतलब 1.15% से कम किया, which is very historic. I guess last 12-13 साल में या फिर 20 साल में कुछ ऐसा हुआ है ये सबसे लोएस्ट रेपो रेट है. दिस इज द लोएस्ट रेपो रेट एंड रिवर्स रेपो रेट. और इतना लो रेपो रेट, रिवर्स रेपो रेट टू ट्राई एंड बूस्ट ग्रोथ, बट ग्रोथ फिर भी नेगेटिव टेरिटरी में जा रहा है. और उसके बदले सपोज इन्फ्लेशन 6% से ऊपर जा रहा है, देन आरबीआई भी ऐसा बोलेगा ना कि करे तो करेगा, बोले तो बोलेगा. Are you getting it? So that's a dilemma in which the economy is. It's a very tricky situation in which economy is. Arshad, we had an entire lecture on this, how repo rate, reverse repo rate impact inflation. We have discussed this. Do you remember this repo rate? मतलब क्या था? Repo rate मतलब the rate at which the banks borrow with the RBI. We had discussed this. The banks borrow with the RBI. तो अगर suppose repo rate को कम कर दिया गया, if the repo rate is less, इसका मतलब क्या? It's okay. That's great. Yes, that's the part in which inflation we had discussed how repo rate impacts the inflation. So if the repo rate is less, the banks will be more inclined to purchase from the RBI. I mean, borrow from the RBI. And when banks will be borrowing from the RBI, banks can give more money to the economy. So there will be more money in the economy. Growth will be propelled. But at the same time, increase in liquidity, increasing purchase power, increase in inflation. Okay, so very tricky situation right now for the government and for the RBI. Okay, we were discussing about someone asked about vaccine also. Yes, retail inflation, then yes, vaccine. So वैक्सीन का क्या सीन था? अभी मेरे ख्याल से लास्ट वीक रशिया ने भी वैक्सीन डिक्लेयर किया, बोला कि हमारा वैक्सीन हो चुका है एंड वी आर रिलीजिंग द वैक्सीन. इनफैक्ट पुतिन ट्राइड ऑन हिज डॉटर आल्सो, क्योंकि उसके डॉटर के ऊपर भी उसने वैक्सीन ट्राई किया. बट many across the scientists across the world are saying that Anthony Fauci, who is the head of I guess the head of the health department there in USA, Anthony Fauci, उसने भी ऐसा बोला कि Russian vaccines seems to be very suspicious. In fact, उन्होंने नाम भी इसका स्पुतनिक दिया, स्पुतनिक 5. I guess they have given the name to this vaccine. Why? Because I guess what is the situation? मैंने ऐसा पढ़ा that Russia is Sputnik 5. Yes, Russia is trying to evoke the Cold War वाला sentiment. Cold War वाला sentiment in its population. Cold War के टाइम पे क्या था? If you have read post World War history or if you know a bit about it, Cold War के टाइम पे ऐसा था that there was US on one side and there was USSR on the other side. US, the capitalist superpower, USSR, the socialist superpower, and they were always clashing in between. Even the tempo of the people, the tempo of the society was also such. I mean, the citizens of the country was also such के US के against कुछ भी करना था, तो I mean USSR के against कुछ भी करना तो पूरा US united होता था at that point of time. ऐसे ही USSR को US के against कुछ भी करना था तो पूरा USSR was united against the USA with their leadership. ठीक है, तो ऐसा सिचुएशन था कोल्ड वॉर के टाइम पे. Putin again wants to evoke that Cold War का time, Cold War का spirit कि देखो हम लोग ने वापस वर्ल्ड से भी सबसे पहले जाके हम लोग ने ये किया. जैसे स्पुतनिक था, स्पुतनिक was the thing, I mean spacecraft went and came back safely. Yeah, it went and came back safely. They would test Russian vaccines. So there is less credibility Russian vaccine. In fact, I only heard this कि उसका पहला ट्रायल खत्म हुआ, उसमें ही पुतिन ने बोल दिया कि हाँ हो गया. Actually कुछ ऐसा रहता है मेरे ख्याल से. First trial is on the animals, the second is on the people, but very small sample size, and then there is third trials which take a lot of time on large section of the population. अब मजा आएगा ना भिड़ू. Putin is acting like Baba Ramdev. Yes, I guess Baba Ramdev must have been an inspiration for Putin. Yes, they skipped the last trial. That's the reason why many people are suspicious. I guess right now in the vaccine race, the vaccine which is leading is America's Oxford ka vaccine. That's the one which is leading, which is explained. Patanjali is going to sponsor IPL. I don't know. But Patanjali is sponsoring IPL. Okay, volunteers for the vaccine, I guess. Okay. Anyways, anything else apart from the vaccine? Anything else apart from the vaccine? Anything? Okay, let's do one thing. Let's rather stop the lecture here. Let's stop the lecture here. And we'll meet again next time. We'll continue with the undone topic, जो capital account वाला part है वो वापस we'll discuss with that. We'll discuss that part. Okay, so we'll stop the lecture here. Guys, take care of yourself. Biden or Trump? Okay, we'll discuss that next time. Just remind me about this. I guess you are talking about Kamala Harris. We'll discuss that next time. See you. Bye, Ashay. Bye, Dhruv. Bye, Smith. Something.